Is Void or Void Termina omnipresent? The shortest answer is no, because this post-description is used to claim that and it's a mistranslation. The correct translation means something that can't possibly be interpreted as omnipresence. The long answer covers the topic better, so let's go over that. This mistranslation has been used for years to claim that Void is omnipresent. It's a characteristic people commonly attribute to him, but it actually makes very little sense. To be omnipresent, one needs to be present everywhere within a given space, like the universe, although this given space can be anything in fiction. The text doesn't say that Void is omnipresent, just that he exists in all dimensions, which can be interpreted in one of two ways. 1. Every dimension/reality has a void, similar to how characters in fiction would often find alternative versions of themselves across other universes. The difference being that, for Void, there will never be a dimension where Void doesn't exist, because he exists in all dimensions. Interpretation 2. Void is in fact omnipresent, existing across all dimensions/realities. The text is so vague that, at a glance, any of these interpretations could be correct, right? Not quite. As per common sense, one should ideally go with the interpretation that takes the least amount of speculation, meaning that each dimension simply has its own void, and that's just looking at that one post description. From the rest of the game, several things seem to contradict the idea of Void being omnipresent, such as the fact that his incarnations can't be killed without an issue for the space he's supposedly ever present on, or the fact that he needs to be revived by having a vessel absorb things across the universe that need to be collected, when supposedly those things would already be inside his body by virtue of being in the universe. Of course, one could justify these things by making up rules of how it is that Void is omnipresent and have it so that there are all things allowed to happen without contradicting anything. But obviously this would be putting up excuses and counterintuitive headcanons when it's much more logical to say that Void isn't omnipresent. The take that fits perfectly by itself, regardless of how it also takes less speculation. Then there is the original text. Let's break it down. The part that matters translates literally as, there were as many Nil flying freely as the number of other skies. Nil being the Japanese name of Void, so it can also be translated as, there were as many Voids flying freely as the number of other skies, if we go by his American name. Either way is fine. As other post descriptions of Void Termina conveniently established, the Kirby series sometimes uses the word sky or skies to mean universe or universes, respectively. As such, you're meant to read this and understand that it means there were voids flying freely, as many as the number of other universes. So, once more, the text is saying that every universe has its own version of Void, which has nothing to do with omnipresence. Since Void reincarnates across the ages, this supposed omnipresence is used by some fans to believe that many characters seen across the series could be Void himself, be it major enemies or even Kirby himself. Make sense? Well, no, it's a lot of nonsense and mental gymnastics. Let's ignore all the prior issues with Void being omnipresent and just say that he is. Okay, that would mean that he is omnipresent across all the dimensions in the Kirby multiverse, encompassing the dimensions themselves, not individual characters living in them, let alone a limited number of beings in them next to all the beings living in the whole universe. Unless existing in all dimensions goes as in being a limited plural amount of beings in each dimension, which is very counterintuitive. It leaves most beings in each universe not being Void, unlike what the text implies when using the interpretation of the dimensions themselves being Void. And at this point we are not even saying that he has omnipresence. Just like being inside a huge mansion filled with hundreds of people, duplicating yourself into 5, and then write that you exist in all the mansion for others to understand what you wrote without any further context. It would be silly and wrong to expect anyone to understand anything close to what is going on because you just communicated that either you are the mansion itself, or, if we recognize that you may have been a bit poetic or inaccurate, you are only mostly the mansion. You know, we could have a story in which someone overtakes the individuality of everyone on Earth, and later claims to be Earth, and we would know that either they're wrong or being poetic, an explanation of how so being that they see the planet as the people in it, prioritizing that over the fact that Earth is still Earth by itself. The truth comes after the fact. We know that this person is being poetic because being poetic fits perfectly as a contradiction of what we knew, which is that they overtook the individuality of everyone on Earth. Nothing even close to this happens in Kirby. The first and only thing we know is that Void is omnipresent across all dimensions of the multiverse, which is not true, but you need to ignore that for now. No information comes before or after this that makes this seem poetic. This is a statement that makes us know more about Void. The only way that you could grab these words and say that they mean whatever you want them to mean is if you don't actually care to know more about Void as much as you care to fit your own biases. The theory of Kirby being a reincarnation of Void. Now the fact comes after the truth. Words don't mean anything. People who write esoteric lore are stupid and don't know what they're saying. They don't want you to decipher the puzzle with logic and reason. It's valid to just feel like you have seen this before elsewhere in other media and apply the same rules. It's as idiotic as it sounds. There is no reason to claim that Void Termina is omnipresent. The people who do so either don't know what omnipresence is, or they do know it and their flaws make it look past that to just go along with what others say.